You keep fighting for someone who doesn't even look back. Not really. Maybe they throw you a glance when it's convenient. Maybe they smile when you give more, offer more, love more. But when you need them, they vanish into silence. And yet, you stay. You tell yourself it's love. You convince your heart it's just timing, circumstances, fear. But deep down, there's a darker truth. You're holding on to someone who never chose you and never intended to. Most people won't admit it, but they've been there. They've loved someone who was emotionally unavailable, someone who gave them just enough to stay, but never enough to feel chosen. You find yourself waiting for a message, replaying words that felt special at the time, clinging to crumbs as if they were a feast. And in that silent suffering, you begin to believe that maybe you're the problem, that maybe if you just try a little harder, become a little better, they'll finally choose you. But let's be brutally honest, they won't, because they never meant to. What you're calling love is a performance, a role you were cast into without your consent. You became the comforter, the motivator, the emotional nurse for someone who only calls when they're empty. And every time you pick up, every time you stay available, you teach them that your heart is a free service, on demand, no cost, no consequence. This isn't love, it's survival, yours. You're trying to survive the pain of being overlooked by proving you're worth noticing. But the harsh truth? Someone who sees your value doesn't need proof. They act, they choose, consistently, publicly, boldly. You've confused inconsistency for mystery, detachment for depth, and it's killing you slowly. When someone really chooses you, they show up. Not when it's easy, not when they're lonely, but every day. Even when it's inconvenient. Real love doesn't wait for better options. It doesn't need breaks. It doesn't send mixed signals. It makes you feel safe, not confused. If you're always trying to decode their silence, explain their absence, or justify their mood swing, you're not in love. You're in emotional captivity. Think about how many times you've rewritten reality just to feel okay. You've said things like, "They're just scared," or "They're not ready yet," when what's really happening is this: they don't want you the way you want them. Not deeply, not completely. And the hardest part to accept is that sometimes people will take everything you offer, your time, your love, your energy, and still not choose you. Because having you without choosing you benefits them more. People don't keep you around because they love you. They keep you because you're useful. You soothe their loneliness. You remind them they're wanted. You lift them when they're low. And in return, they offer just enough attention to keep you emotionally addicted. They know your triggers. They know your longing. They know how to disappear when you get too close, and reappear when they sense you're starting to move on. That's not love. That's control. You're not crazy for wanting love. You're not weak for craving connection. But you are lying to yourself if you believe that being a second choice will eventually make you the first. You won't win someone's heart by losing yourself. You can't earn love by becoming less of who you are to fit their lack of capacity. What makes this even more dangerous is how society romanticizes the struggle. How many movies, songs, and stories have we consumed where persistence is mistaken for loyalty, and one-sided suffering is repackaged as proof of true love? You've been taught that if you just hold on long enough, they'll come around. But Machiavelli would say otherwise. He'd tell you, never fight for a throne that isn't yours. Because the longer you bow to a kingdom that doesn't welcome you, the more you lose your right to ever build your own. The truth is, we often love people not because of who they are, but because of how they make us feel about ourselves when they briefly see us. That 5-second flash of recognition becomes our drug. That one good night outshines 20 others filled with silence. That one compliment outweighs a month of emotional starvation. We become so addicted to the glimpse of connection that we ignore the reality of constant rejection. You deserve more than a temporary role in someone else's movie. You deserve to be the story, not the background character they cut out when the scene changes. And deep down, You know it. But walking away means facing the emptiness you've been trying to outrun, the emptiness you've been stuffing with illusion, hope, and fantasy. You think that staying will protect you from the pain of being alone. The truth is, you're already alone. And worse, you're alone while being used. There's no healing in that. There's no dignity in begging to be loved. Every time you choose to stay in a place where you're not seen, you teach your soul that it doesn't matter. And eventually, your spirit starts to believe it. The person who truly loves you won't let you carry the relationship alone. They won't disappear when you're vulnerable. They won't give silence when you need clarity. They won't treat your heart like an option on a waiting list. And most importantly, they won't let you fight for them while they sit back and watch. You were not created to be tolerated. You were meant to be celebrated. But that can only happen when you stop idolizing people who only see you as useful. When you finally understand that love without choice is not love, it's dependence. And when you let go of what was never yours to begin with, you make space for something, or someone, that actually chooses you without hesitation. And sometimes, the greatest sign of strength is not how long you can hold on, but how firmly you can let go. You keep waking up tired, not because your body is exhausted, but because your heart is. You spend every ounce of energy trying to matter to someone who never truly asked for your love, but never declined it either. That's the trap. They don't tell you to stop. They don't tell you they don't care. They just keep you there, emotionally available, consistently present, endlessly waiting, because your loyalty is convenient and your silence is useful. You start giving more. You become the emotional glue. You check in when they disappear. You apologize even when you did nothing wrong. You justify their coldness with phrases like, "They're just going through something," while you're the one drowning in the silence they created. Your texts get shorter replies. Your presence becomes a background noise. But you still give. Because maybe, just maybe, this next gesture, this next sacrifice, will be the one that makes them see you. And that's where it gets dangerous. Because you're not just giving out of love anymore. You're giving out of desperation. Not desperation to be loved, but desperation to validate that all you've already given wasn't in vain. You're not just fighting for someone to choose you. You're fighting against the shame of having chosen someone who never would. That shame burns quietly in your chest. You don't talk about it. You tell yourself you're strong, you're understanding, but deep down, there's a whisper. Why am I never enough? This is the lie that keeps you locked in. You think you're close. You think you're on the verge of being seen. And that's how they keep you, with just enough warmth to keep the hope alive, but never enough consistency to let that hope grow roots. It's not love. It's emotional gambling. You're playing slot machines with your heart, pulling the lever every day, hoping for a jackpot that was never programmed into the system. The imbalance starts eating you. You begin to shape your personality around their preferences. You start hiding the parts of yourself that might seem too much. You silence your needs. You lower your expectations. You shrink so they feel bigger. And every time they reward you with a smile, a text, or a short call, you treat it like a victory. But it's not. It's a leash, one they control. One you tighten around your own neck every time you tell yourself that a little love is better than no love at all. Let's be real. They know exactly what they're doing. This isn't ignorance, it's strategy. People don't keep others close without realizing the impact they're having. They might not say it out loud, but they feel it. They see the way you light up when they appear. They notice how quickly you respond. They feel the power they hold, and many times they feed off it. Not because they're evil, but because they're empty. And using you to feel full is easier than facing their own lack. You're not just being ignored, you're being drained, piece by piece, day by day, until one day you wake up and barely recognize yourself. Your dreams are quieter, your confidence is thinner, your world revolves around someone who can barely look you in the eyes when it matters. And still, you give, because you've convinced yourself that maybe this is what love looks like, that maybe real love hurts like this, but it doesn't. Real love isn't a negotiation. It doesn't need reminders. It doesn't take and take and take until you've got nothing left to give. If you're the only one carrying the weight, it's not a relationship. It's a transaction. One where your heart is the currency and the price just keeps rising. Think back. How many times have you tried to leave? How many conversations did you rehearse in your head, telling yourself, "This time, I'll walk away"? But then, right before the moment of clarity, they show up again. A call, a compliment, a vague apology that sounds like care but isn't. And you fold, because deep down, you're still waiting for the version of them you built in your mind, not the one standing in front of you. They don't have to be cruel to be harmful. Emotional neglect wears a friendly face. It tells you you're overreacting. It smiles while it disappears. It invites you in, then locks the door behind you. And the more you normalize it, the more you begin to believe that maybe this is the best it gets, that maybe you're asking for too much, that maybe your standards are unrealistic. So, you settle. You settle for being tolerated when you were born to be treasured. This kind of relationship changes you. It reprograms your self-worth. You begin to feel guilty for having need. You start apologizing for your feelings. You start believing that love is earned through suffering. And worse, you start teaching others that they can treat you the same way. Because once you accept less from one person, your boundaries weaken for everyone else. And then comes the worst part. You begin to mirror their silence. You start hiding your pain. You smile through heartbreak. You post like you're fine. You laugh when you're dying inside. Because if they don't care, why should anyone else? You learn to perform your life while silently hoping someone will look close enough to see that you're unraveling. But you don't have to keep unraveling. The person who drains you isn't your destiny. They're your distraction. They keep you locked in cycles so you never realize what you actually deserve. They're not your soulmate. They're the test before your transformation. And once you stop fighting for their attention, you start fighting for your peace. You've already proven how deeply you can love. Now prove how fiercely you can protect yourself. That same energy you give to people who barely show up for you, give it to your healing, to your boundaries, to your future. Because the truth is, you're not broken. You're just exhausted from loving people who never knew what to do with someone like you. You don't need to become colder to protect yourself. You need to become clearer about what you want, about what you deserve, and most importantly, about what you're no longer willing to accept. The first sign of power is not when you make them stay. It's when you finally realize you're done begging. And when that moment comes, when you stop reaching for someone who never reached back, everything starts to shift. You've probably told yourself, they're just not ready yet. Or maybe, they're confused, but they do care. You hold on to these narratives like lifelines because the truth is too painful to say out loud, that you're not their first choice, maybe not even their second. You're a placeholder, a soft place to land when the world is cold, a comforting voice when no one else is around. And even if it breaks you to admit it, deep inside, you know, if they truly wanted you, they wouldn't be this distant. Let that sink in. If someone really saw your value, they wouldn't risk losing you. They wouldn't hesitate to choose you. Love, real love, doesn't need convincing, and it doesn't need waiting lists. But here you are, stuck in the loop of almosts. Almost enough. Almost chosen. Almost loved. And every almost carves a little deeper into your sense of worth. It starts with small things. They take hours to reply. They cancel plans last minute. They say things like, "I'm just not good at relationships," or "I need to figure myself out." But then you watch as they show up for other people. They make time for others. They laugh with others. They chase people who don't even treat them right. And you wonder, why not me? You tell yourself, maybe if I'm more patient, more loving, more understanding, they'll finally see what I see in them. But that's not how it works. People already know who they value. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. We all do. When someone truly matters to us, we don't delay. We prioritize. That instinct isn't something you learn. It's something you feel, and if they're not feeling it for you, nothing you do will create it. No amount of proving your worth will manufacture desire where it doesn't already exist. You're not their plan A. You're the fallback, the just in case, the person they keep around in silence, because being alone is harder than having you halfway. It's a cruel comfort because it keeps you hopeful. They may never say the words, but their actions whisper the truth. You are replaceable. Not because you're not valuable, but because you're available, always, no matter what. This is the paradox of love. The more accessible you make yourself to someone who doesn't appreciate you, the less they see your worth. We romanticize loyalty, but there's a difference between loyalty and self-betrayal. Real loyalty has limits. Real love has boundaries. And choosing someone who never chooses you back isn't loyalty. It's abandonment of self. Think about how much you've changed to fit their absence. How you lower your standards just to keep them in your life. How you say yes to things that hurt you because saying no feels like losing them. You become smaller, quieter, more agreeable, less of who you really are, more of who you think they'll finally choose. But no one worth having will ever make you shrink to fit their preferences. The worst part? They sense your hesitation to leave. They can feel the power imbalance. And instead of stepping up, they relax into it. Because they know, no matter how far they drift, you'll chase. No matter how quiet they get, you'll reach out. And this makes them feel wanted. Even when they have no intention of returning the favor, they don't have to be malicious. It doesn't take evil to exploit someone's love. It just takes indifference. They may not think, I'm using them, but they are. Because they know you're hurting. They know you're waiting. And they choose, every day, not to change that. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. You might think, but they're not doing anything wrong. And maybe that's what hurts the most. They're not screaming, not cheating, not yelling. They're just not choosing you. And because the pain is quiet, it feels easier to ignore. But emotional neglect is still abuse, especially when it's packaged as kindness. When someone can break your heart gently while still smiling and calling you friend. The truth is, being someone's maybe is far more dangerous than being someone's no. At least with rejection, there's closure. But with ambiguity, there's endless hope. And hope, when misplaced, becomes poison. It keeps you invested in a fantasy. It convinces you to wait a little longer, to give a little more, to hold on just in case. But just in case is the prison where your self-worth dies. You start living in reaction to their availability. You dress better, hoping they'll notice. You post stories, hoping they'll watch. You pretend to move on, hoping they'll stop you. And when they don't, you spiral. You analyze every detail, every delay in a message, every change in tone. You become a detective in your own relationship, constantly searching for signs that maybe, just maybe, they're coming around. But here's a brutal truth. If you have to search for signs, they're not there. Love doesn't hide. Love doesn't play games. Love doesn't make you question your worth. And love sure as hell doesn't treat you like an option when you're offering loyalty like a promise. You are not here to be someone's good enough for now. You are not a placeholder. You are not a convenience. You are not a second choice, a backup plan, or an emotional crutch. And the longer you allow someone to treat you as less, the more you start to believe you are. This isn't about being chosen by them. This is about finally choosing yourself. Choosing to walk away, not because you stopped caring, but because they never started. Choosing to close a door that leads nowhere. Choosing to stop bleeding for someone who won't even offer a bandage. And once you see it, truly see it, you can't unsee it. You can't keep pretending. You can't keep excusing. You can't keep calling it love when it only ever made you feel small. You deserve more than almost. You deserve more than the silent agony of waiting for someone to realize what they had. You deserve someone who knows it the moment you walk into their life and never forgets it after. There comes a point when even your soul gets tired of waiting. Not just tired of the silence or the excuses or the hollow gestures, but tired of carrying a hope that's never fed. That kind of exhaustion doesn't come from being dramatic or impatient. It comes from being deeply human, from pouring yourself into someone who only ever gave you glimpses of what love could be, but never the real thing. And the truth is, there's something even more painful than heartbreak: staying loyal to a fantasy while your reality falls apart. If Machiavelli were watching you now, he wouldn't call it noble. He wouldn't praise your dedication, your emotional endurance, or your willingness to wait. He'd say something sharp, something cold, something like, "You're fighting for a throne that was never built for you." Because when you give your power to someone who doesn't see your worth, you're not being loyal, you're surrendering. Not to them, but to the fear that maybe this is all you'll ever get. That fear is powerful. It convinces you to stay quiet when you're hurt, to accept half-hearted apologies and recycled promises, to laugh at jokes that sting and nod at plans you were never really included in. You become a ghost in your own love story, present but unseen, necessary but replaceable. And yet, you cling, because the idea of being alone feels more terrifying than the reality of being used. But what if I told you that your silence isn't protecting you, that staying in a relationship where your needs are ignored isn't saving your heart? It's slowly dismantling it. Every time you say, "It's fine," when it's not, you build a wall between you and your own truth. And eventually, you stop recognizing the person you've become. You used to speak up. You used to expect more. You used to dream of a love that felt like safety, not survival. Now you dream of being noticed and call it enough. But here's the harsh wisdom. The longer you stay in a space that diminishes you, the more you teach yourself that this is your level, and people rise or fall to the level you accept. If you keep showing up for someone who wouldn't even notice if you stopped, you're not proving your love. You're proving your fear of letting go. Machiavelli wasn't a romantic, but he understood power. And in relationships, power isn't about control. It's about clarity. Knowing who you are, what you deserve, what you will and will not tolerate. He would have told you, never place your loyalty in hands that do not guard it. Never fight for closeness with someone who uses distance as a weapon. Never plead for love from a mouth that only speaks convenience. Think about it. If you disappeared from their life tomorrow, would they truly chase you? Not just send a message or react to a post, but really come after you with presence, clarity, urgency? Or would they just let you fade, replacing your role with someone else who's also willing to give too much for too little? That question burns. It hurts because you already know the answer. And yet, there's still this small, aching part of you that keeps asking, what if I leave and they finally realize they love me? But that's not love. That's fear again, dressing up as hope. The real question is this: why do you need to leave to be valued? Love shouldn't require a threat to be taken seriously. If someone only realizes your worth when you're gone, they never saw it when you were right there in front of them. That's not a soulmate. That's a spectator, watching your loyalty, enjoying your presence, but never stepping into the arena with you. And you deserve more than to be someone's emotional background noise. There's a certain kind of power that comes when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop chasing, when you stop showing up for people who don't show up for you. It's not bitterness, it's liberation. You're not closing your heart. You're closing the door to a place where your love was never honored. You don't need revenge. You don't need them to hurt. You don't even need closure. You just need to remember who you were before you believed you needed their validation to feel whole. That version of you, the one that loved without condition, that gave freely, that believed in the possibility of real connection, still exists. But it's time they started loving themselves with the same passion they once gave away to someone else. You might think that walking away is giving up, that it's admitting defeat. But walking away is not weakness. It's clarity in motion. It's choosing peace over chaos, dignity over desperation. It's saying, I'm no longer available to be disrespected, not even subtly, not even silently. And when you take that step, the real step, the one where you stop hoping they'll change, Stop checking your phone. Stop analyzing their words. Something profound happens. You stop bending. You stop shrinking. You stop contorting your soul into shapes that make other people comfortable. And instead, you start building a throne of your own. Because the throne isn't just about being chosen, it's about realizing you never needed to compete for love in the first place. Love that is earned through suffering isn't love. It's manipulation. Love that forces you to wait in silence isn't patient. It's absent. And love that demands you abandon yourself to prove your worth is nothing but an emotional trap. You've spent so long fighting to be seen that you forgot how to see yourself. So here's a reminder. You are not hard to love. You were just loving the wrong person the right way. And now, it's time to turn that love inward, to choose you the way they never did, to walk away not with bitterness, but with the unshakable knowledge that you deserve better. And better is no longer a dream. It's a standard. There's a quiet kind of strength that emerges when you finally stop fighting for someone else's attention and start choosing yourself. It doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself, but it shifts everything. You no longer beg for clarity. You no longer search for signs. You begin to see things as they are, not as you hoped they would be. And in that space, in that raw honesty, you begin to reclaim your life, not as someone's backup plan, but as your own main character. It starts subtly. You stop checking your phone as often. You stop waiting for messages that never come. The weight in your chest that used to swell every time they were distant, it begins to loosen. You feel the absence of their presence not as a loss, but as room. Room to breathe. Room to rebuild. Room to remember that love isn't something you chase. It's something that finds you when you're no longer running from yourself. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you start loving yourself more. Enough to walk away. Enough to let go of the fantasy. Enough to release the grip on a story that only ever lived in your mind. And yes, it hurts. It hurts like hell. There's a unique kind of grief in letting go of someone who never truly held you. But in that grief, there's also rebirth. Because for the first time, you're no longer negotiating your worth. You begin to rebuild the parts of you that were chipped away piece by piece. You revisit the hobbies you abandoned. You call friends you stopped talking to. You sleep without anxiety. You laugh without guilt. You realize that peace isn't boring. It's healing. You realize that being alone isn't loneliness. It's sovereignty. And something incredible happens when you reclaim that sovereignty. You stop attracting people who want to use your light without ever giving any back. You stop accepting apologies that are only meant to reset the cycle. You start setting boundaries, not to keep others out, but to protect the sacredness you're rediscovering within. People might not understand at first. They'll say you've changed, that you're colder, more distant. But the truth is, you're clearer, you're cleaner in your decision. You're more precise with your energy. You've stopped pouring yourself into broken vessels. You've stopped playing the role of emotional savior for people who wouldn't even hand you a rope when you were drowning. There's a story about a woman who spent years chasing the affection of someone who only showed up when it was convenient. She'd send long, vulnerable messages. She'd cancel plans for them. She even defended them to her friends who warned her. Until one day, she didn't. One day, she didn't reply. She didn't ask for closure. She didn't cry. She just stopped. And that silence, that unshakable, unbothered silence, was the loudest declaration of self-worth she'd ever made. That's what happens when you finally let go. You stop needing explanations. You stop trying to understand why they couldn't love you, because you realize the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that you were always worth loving, even if they never saw it, even if they never said it. Their blindness doesn't diminish your light. Their silence doesn't define your voice. Their absence doesn't erase your existence. You begin to operate differently. You start asking yourself better questions. Not, why didn't they choose me? But, why did I keep choosing someone who wouldn't? Not, what's wrong with me? But, why did I think I had to earn love through pain? These questions aren't easy, but they're necessary. Because they don't point to others. They point to you, to the places where healing begins. And the most beautiful part? You realize you're not broken. You were never broken. You were just believing in a version of love that required you to bleed for it. But love, real love, doesn't demand suffering. It doesn't hide behind mixed signals. It doesn't punish you for being open. It meets you. It holds you. It chooses you without hesitation, without games, without conditions. You don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to audition for someone else's affection. You get to be whole. You get to be enough. And from that place, you begin to attract people who speak your language, the language of presence, of truth, of consistent action. People who don't just say they care, but show it every single day. And when someone like that comes along, someone who doesn't make you guess, someone who sees you clearly and chooses you without delay, you'll feel the difference in your bones. It won't feel like a high. It won't feel like obsession. It will feel like rest, like home, like finally being able to exhale. But before that person comes, you come. Your own love, your own safety, your own sanctuary. That's the part no one tells you. That becoming whole before you are chosen by someone else is the real revolution. Because once you've built that within, no one can take it away. No one can reduce you again to a role. You'll never settle again for being tolerated when you've learned to be celebrated. First, by you. So now, it's your turn. Not to prove anything. Not to fight, but to walk in quiet power. To carry yourself like the gift you are. To set the standard so high that only those who rise to meet it get access to your life. You've begged, you've bled, you've waited. Now, you rise. And when you do, don't look back. Because what's ahead of you isn't just healing. It's the kind of love you always dreamed of. Only now, it begins with you.